November 1944, Camp Aliceville, Alabama. A German Luftwaffe pilot named Klaus Richter stared at an American sergeant eating brown paste straight from a jar with a spoon. No bread, no shame, just pure enjoyment. Klaus had bombed London. He'd shot down 12 Allied planes. He'd survived 3 years of war. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what he was about to taste. Within 72 hours, that jar would do what Allied propaganda never could: destroy his faith in the Third Reich completely. And it would spark a black market war inside the prison camp more dangerous than anything he'd faced in the skies. What could possibly be inside that jar? Why were American guards fighting over it like treasure? And how would a simple food item trigger the most explosive 3 months in Camp Aliceville's history, including a near riot, a black market empire, and a confrontation between a Nazi true believer and a Texas cowboy that would change the Cold War? The answer starts with a taste. But first you need to understand the man who took that first bite. Klaus Richter, 28 years old, Iron Cross recipient, stationed in France until his Messerschmitt was shot down over Belgium in September 1943, 15 months in transit camps, 3 escape attempts, a reputation among guards as the difficult one. He refused to speak English, refused American cigarettes, refused to acknowledge defeat. But on November 16, 1944, he would beg. Actually beg an American sergeant for more peanut butter. What happened between that first bite and that moment of surrender, let me show you. This is the story of how American abundance, so casual, so ordinary, that we fed it to our enemies, accidentally won a psychological war that military intelligence couldn't. It's about 78 German POWs at Camp Aliceville who arrived believing Nazi propaganda about starving America. Within 2 weeks, they were trading Iron Crosses and wedding rings for jars of peanut butter. And by the time they returned to Germany in 1947, they carried something more dangerous than any weapon: the truth about American power. If you or your family served during this time, drop a comment. I want to hear your story. Let me be clear about who these men were. These weren't drafted teenagers scared of combat. These were elite soldiers, submarine crews, and Luftwaffe pilots. The best Hitler had. They'd fought from North Africa to Norway. They'd believed the cause. And they arrived at Camp Aliceville expecting torture, starvation, and brutality. Because that's what German propaganda promised happened to POWs in America. Klaus Richter sat in the third rail car from the engine wrist chained loosely to the bench beside him. The train clattered south through Tennessee, then into Alabama. He'd spent 15 months as a prisoner, first in Belgium, then England, then onto a ship that crossed the Atlantic in November 1943, processing camps in New York, then south, always south, deeper into the heart of enemy territory. He studied his fellow prisoners. Werner Vogel sat across from him, 35 years old, U-boat commander, veteran of 14 Atlantic patrols, lost his entire crew when his submarine was depth-charged off the coast of Newfoundland in August 1943. He was the only survivor. Werner's face was stone, hard, scarred. A thin white line ran from his left temple to his jaw, courtesy of flying metal when the depth charges hit. He rarely spoke. When he did, men listened. Next to Werner sat Franz Keller, 24, Afrika Korps infantry, farm boy from Bavaria, captured at El Alamein in November 1942, which made him the longest-held prisoner in this group, 2 years in British and American custody. Franz was different from the others, quieter, more observant. Klaus had noticed Franz watching the guards, carefully studying their faces, their movements, their interactions with each other. Like he was trying to understand something the rest of them had missed. The train slowed. Metal wheels screamed against rails. The sound echoed through the Alabama countryside. November 15, 1944. The air outside was cool but humid. Different from the dry heat of North Africa where Franz had been captured. Different from the frozen nightmare of the Atlantic where Werner had almost drowned. Different from the burning skies over France where Klaus had fallen. 78 German prisoners stepped off the train at Camp Aliceville. Their boots hit American soil for the first time. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense anymore. They were prisoners of war in a country they had been taught to hate, a country they had been told was weak, starving, broken by economic collapse. Sergeant Jack Thompson stood on the platform watching them disembark. 42 years old, 6'3", 230 pounds of muscle and weathered skin. Former ranch foreman from West Texas. Widower. 3 sons fighting in the Pacific. He'd taken this assignment because he couldn't fight overseas anymore, not at his age, but he could damn well serve his country by guarding prisoners. Thompson studied the Germans as they lined up. He'd been told to expect arrogance, defiance, Nazi true believers who would cause trouble. What he saw instead was exhaustion, confusion, and underneath it all, fear poorly disguised as contempt. His eyes stopped on Klaus. The pilot stood at attention, chin raised, eyes forward, iron cross visible on his worn Luftwaffe uniform. Thompson had seen that look before. Pride masking terror. The look of a man who'd lost everything but refused to admit it. Thompson's orders were clear. Geneva Conventions. Treat them humanely. Feed them the same rations American soldiers ate. House them in decent conditions. No torture, no brutality, just detention until the war ended and they could be repatriated. Thompson had been skeptical when he first read those orders. These men had killed Americans. His wife's younger brother had died at Normandy, probably fighting against pilots exactly like Klaus Richter. Part of Thompson wanted to make them suffer. But orders were orders. And Jack Thompson had spent his entire life following a simple code: do what's right, even when it's hard. The camp commander, Captain Harold Morrison, approached the formation. 38 years old, West Point graduate, lost his own brother at Normandy. But Morrison believed in something Thompson was just beginning to understand: that how you treat your enemies says more about you than about them. Morrison addressed the prisoners through an interpreter. Standard welcome, camp rules, expectations, consequences for misbehavior. The Germans listened in silence. Some nodded. Most stared straight ahead, faces blank. Klaus heard the words but didn't process them. His mind was cataloging details. The camp buildings, wooden structures, not temporary barracks but permanent installations. Real wood, glass windows. The fences were tall and secure, but the guard towers looked almost casual. Like the Americans weren't really worried about escapes. The guards themselves, well-fed. Their uniforms were clean, new. Some looked brand new, like they'd just been issued. Where was the poverty? Where were the starving masses the Reich's newspapers had described? Where were the breadlines and the desperation Klaus felt the first crack in his certainty? Small, almost imperceptible. But there. The guards led them to the barracks. The women's section was on the east side of the camp, separated by additional fencing. The men's section housed the 78 German prisoners in 4 large buildings. Klaus was assigned to Barracks A with Werner and Franz. Inside, Klaus stopped. Bunk beds lined both walls. Real mattresses, not straw pallets or bare boards. Real mattresses with blankets. Wool blankets. Thick, clean. At the end of the barracks, a bathroom with plumbing. Hot water according to the guard who showed them around. Showers, multiple shower heads. A luxury Klaus hadn't experienced since before the war. Werner walked slowly down the center aisle, touching bunks, testing mattresses. His face showed nothing, but Klaus knew him well enough by now to recognize the confusion. Franz sat on a bottom bunk and bounced slightly, testing the mattress. He looked up at Klaus with an expression Klaus couldn't quite read. Not happiness, something more complicated. Maybe suspicion, maybe wonder. That night, Klaus lay in his bunk, unable to sleep. Not from fear, not from discomfort. The bed was actually soft, the blanket was warm. He couldn't sleep because nothing made sense. If America was collapsing, if their economy had failed, if their people were starving, why were they housing enemy prisoners in conditions better than most German barracks? The propaganda had been clear. America was weak, broken by the Great Depression. Their military was poorly equipped. Their soldiers were cowards who would break under pressure from superior German discipline. Victory was inevitable because Germany was strong and America was finished. But this camp didn't look finished. It looked permanent, expensive, well-maintained. Klaus pushed the thoughts away. Propaganda tricks. Had to be. Make the prisoners comfortable so they would talk. Reveal secrets. Break their spirits with false kindness. He'd been warned about this in training. The Americans would try psychological warfare. He wouldn't fall for it. The next morning came with gray skies and the smell of coffee drifting through the camp. Real coffee. Klaus could smell it even before the guards came to wake them. Rich, strong, the kind of coffee he hadn't smelled in years. The Germans were marched to the mess hall for their first meal. The building was large and clean. Long wooden tables stretched across the room. Maybe 12 tables each, long enough to seat 10 men. The Americans had set one table aside for the guards, but it was right next to the prisoner tables. Not separated, not isolated, just adjacent, like they weren't worried about sitting near the enemy. The smell hit Klaus immediately. Bread baking, meat cooking, real meat, not the ersatz garbage Germany had been producing for years. Not mystery scraps or synthetic substitutes. Actual beef. Klaus could smell it, identify it. His mouth started watering before he could stop himself. Werner gripped Klaus's arm, leaned close, whispered in German, "They're fattening us up for something." Klaus nodded. Had to be. This was too much, too generous. There had to be a purpose. But what the kitchen staff brought out trays. American kitchen workers, some of them women. They placed identical trays in front of prisoners and guards alike. Klaus stared at his tray. White bread, soft, fresh. Not the hard black bread Germany had been producing since the blockade started. This bread looked like it had been baked that morning. Klaus could see steam rising from it. Vegetable soup, real carrots visible, potatoes, onions, thick, rich, meat, a piece of beef, small but identifiable. Not scraps, not gristle, actual meat. Canned peaches, in sweet syrup. Klaus could see the fruit through the glass jar. Golden, perfect. Coffee, real coffee. Dark, strong. The smell alone was intoxicating. And on every table sitting in the center, like a centerpiece, glass jars filled with brown paste. Klaus stared at the jar closest to him. The substance inside was thick. It clung to the sides of the glass like grease. The color reminded him of mud. Or maybe machine oil. A paper label said 2 words in English, peanut butter. "What is that?" Franz asked quietly in German. No one knew. Klaus watched the American guards at the adjacent table. Sergeant Thompson sat with 5 other guards. They were eating the same food. Identical trays. Same bread. Same soup. Same meat. Same jars of brown paste. Thompson reached for his jar, twisted the lid. It opened with a soft pop. He took a knife and scooped out a massive portion, spread it thick on his bread. So thick, Klaus could see the knife marks in the paste. Then Thompson took another scoop and put it directly in his mouth. No bread, just paste on a spoon, like it was ice cream. Thompson closed his eyes, chewed, swallowed, smiled. Klaus felt something cold in his chest. That wasn't performance. That wasn't mockery. That was genuine pleasure. The American sergeant loved whatever was in that jar. Werner saw it too. His face had gone pale. "What the hell is that?" Werner muttered. Franz, the quiet farm boy, stared with wide eyes. Whatever it is, they love it. And that's when Klaus realized something terrifying. The Americans weren't eating different food. Officers, guards, kitchen staff. Everyone ate the same meal. In German camps, hierarchy was visible in every bite. Officers ate meat, guards ate bread, prisoners ate slop. The food you received announced your value, your rank, your place in the order. But here, everyone got jars of brown paste. Everyone fought over extra portions. Klaus watched a young private trade his apple to another guard for the guard's jar of paste. Watch them negotiate. Watch them complete the trade like it was precious. This wasn't poverty. This wasn't even equality. This was something the Third Reich had never prepared him for. Abundance so extreme that rank didn't matter. So much food that even the lowest private could trade away fresh fruit for brown paste and not worry about going hungry. Werner addressed the Germans in German, low voice, commanding, "Don't touch the brown paste. It could be poisoned, or a trick to make us weak. Eat everything else but leave those jars untouched." 78 Germans obeyed. They ate the bread, ate the soup, ate the meat, drank the coffee, devoured the peaches, but the jars sat sealed, untouched, suspicious. Sergeant Thompson noticed. He stood, walked over to the German tables, stopped next to Werner. spoke through the camp interpreter, a German-American private named Schmidt, who'd grown up speaking both languages. "You boys don't like peanut butter?" Werner looked up, met Thompson's eyes. "We don't trust it," Thompson laughed. Not mockery, just genuine amusement. "Smart. If I was in your position, I wouldn't trust nothing either. But I'll tell you what." Thompson walked back to his table, got his own jar, opened it, took a huge spoonful, ate it while standing directly in front of Werner. Chewed, swallowed. "Been eating this since I was 5 years old. My mama packed peanut butter sandwiches in my school lunch every single day for 12 years. Every family in America has jars in their kitchen. It ain't poison. It's just peanuts ground up with salt and oil. We got so many damn peanuts we don't know what to do with them all." Klaus's mind stopped. Replayed those words. "So many peanuts, we don't know what to do with them all." The American said it casually, like it was normal to have too much food, like surplus was expected. But Germany counted every gram. Families stretched rations until there was nothing left. Children went to bed hungry. And this cowboy sergeant was saying they had excess enough to grind into butter. Klaus looked at the jar again, at the thick brown paste inside, at the way Thompson had eaten it with such obvious pleasure, at the way the guards traded for it like currency. If Americans had so much food they could make butter from surplus peanuts. What else had the Reich lied about? That night, Klaus lay in his bunk, unable to sleep. Not from discomfort. The bed was actually soft. The blanket was warm. He couldn't sleep because of those jars. Why did Americans love it so much? They fought over it. Why did they give it to enemies like it was garbage? And most dangerously, what else had the Reich lied about? He didn't know it yet, but tomorrow morning, everything would change. Because Franz Keller, the quiet farm boy, was about to make a decision that would start a war inside the camp. November 16th, 1944, 0700 hours. Breakfast. Franz Keller made the decision that would split the German prisoners into two factions and trigger 3 months of black market warfare. He reached for the jar. Franz had been hungry for 3 years. Real gnawing hunger that made your stomach hurt and your hands shake. The kind of hunger where you dream about bread and wake up disappointed. He'd watched his mother ration food back in Bavaria, spreading butter so thin you could see through it. He'd eaten rations in Africa so bad they gave him dysentery. And now in an enemy prison camp, he saw more food than he'd seen in years. The brown paste smelled good. Rich. Nutty. The Americans devoured it with joy. What did they know that he didn't? Werner hissed in German. "Franz, don't you dare." "That's an order." Franz looked at Werner, spoke quietly, firmly. "You're not my commanding officer anymore, Werner. We lost. The war's over for us. I'm hungry, and I want to know what's in that jar." Franz's hand shook slightly as he twisted the lid. It opened with a soft pop. The smell rose immediately. Rich, nutty, slightly sweet. Nothing like the rancid fats Germany had been calling butter for the past 2 years. Franz took a knife, spread a thin layer on bread, very thin, almost invisible. The paste was thick, sticky. It clung to the bread and the knife. The other Germans watched in silence. Werner's face showed anger mixed with curiosity. Klaus watched with fists clenched, jaw tight. Franz lifted the bread to his mouth, took the smallest possible bite, chewed slowly. His face showed nothing at first. Neutral, cautious, analytical. Then his eyebrows rose. His eyes widened. He chewed more, swallowed, stared at the bread in his hand like it had betrayed him. "Mein Gott." Franz whispered it, barely audible. "Well," Klaus demanded. "Is it terrible?" Franz took another bite, bigger this time, chewed with eyes closed. When he opened them, tears were forming. It's incredible. It's salty and sweet at the same time. It fills your mouth. It's rich like butter, but better. It tastes like Franz struggled for words. It tastes like strength, like energy, like everything our bodies have been missing. He took a third bite, a fourth. Within 30 seconds, he'd consumed half the slice. "They eat this every day," Franz asked, voice full of wonder and horror. "American children eat this every day for their entire lives." Sergeant Thompson walked by. Overheard. "Every day. My kids eat it. My wife eats it. Every family in America. We got more peanuts than we know what to do with. Hell, we feed peanuts to pigs when we got surplus." What happened next, Captain Morrison would later describe in his official report as the most extraordinary breakfast in military history. One German reached for a jar, then another, then 5, then 20. Werner tried to maintain order, but hunger beat loyalty. Within 10 minutes, Klaus found himself with knife in hand spreading peanut butter on bread, telling himself he was just investigating enemy rations, just doing reconnaissance. The first bite stopped his thoughts completely. Everything Franz said was true, but more than that, Klaus's body recognized it. After years of protein deficiency, inadequate calories, vitamin shortages, his starving cells grabbed onto this nutrition like drowning men grab life rafts. Protein, fat, calories, dense, real, life-giving. He took another bite, then another. His hands moved automatically, his rational mind shut down by primal need. By 0800 hours, every jar on every table was empty. 47 jars, consumed in one meal. American kitchen staff stood frozen, watching German prisoners scrape glass with spoons, lick knives, press bread against jar bottoms to capture every molecule. Yesterday, they wouldn't touch it. Private Tommy Nelson whispered. Today, they ate 3 months of supply in 1 hour. Werner sat alone staring at his empty jar. He was a U-boat commander. He had faced depth charges. He had ordered men to their deaths. He had fought for the fatherland with everything he had, and he was just defeated by a jar of peanut butter. Not defeated in battle, defeated in belief. Because if Americans have so much food, they give this to prisoners, then everything we were told was a lie. That afternoon, Supply Sergeant Davis checked his inventory with shaking hands. The women's section had consumed 340% above projections. The men's section 520%. He wrote in his report, German prisoners have developed extreme fixated preference for peanut butter, requesting emergency resupply, consumption rate unsustainable. Warning rationing may cause prisoner unrest. Captain Morrison made the announcement at 1400 hours through the camp interpreter. Due to supply constraints, peanut butter will be rationed, 1 jar per table per meal. No exceptions. The Germans protested immediately, not with violence, with something more dangerous. Desperation. Klaus spoke for the group, in broken English. First time speaking it, 1 jar not enough. We need more. Captain Morrison looked surprised Klaus spoke English. Yesterday you refused to eat it. Klaus chose his words carefully. Yesterday we did not understand. Today we understand. We want more. Sergeant Thompson spoke quietly to Morrison. Sir, we just watched the Third Reich fall apart over breakfast. Might want to request that resupply. That night, Klaus wrote in a hidden notebook he kept against regulations. The brown paste is called peanut butter. Americans eat it every day. They make it from peanuts, which are so common here, they feed them to animals. We were told America had no food. This was a lie. What else was a lie? And why do I not care anymore? Why do I only think about getting more of that paste? He paused, pencil hovering. Then wrote one final sentence. I think I understand now why Germany lost. You cannot defeat a country that has so much they don't know what to do with it all. He didn't know it yet, but within 48 hours, that jar of peanut butter would trigger the most elaborate black market operation in Camp Aliceville's history. And Klaus Richter, former Luftwaffe ace decorated pilot, true believer in German superiority, would become its kingpin. Because imprisoned power doesn't come from rank or medals. Power comes from controlling what people want. And what these men wanted, what they needed, was more brown gold. Week 3, November 1944. What started as a food preference became an obsession. What became an obsession became a currency. And what became a currency became a war. Let me show you how 78 German prisoners turned a prison camp into the most dangerous black market in Alabama, and how an American cowboy would ultimately have to step in to prevent bloodshed. The math was brutal. 1 jar per table per meal, 8 men per table, 3 meals per day, result approximately 2 tablespoons per man per day. For men who'd discovered what their bodies had been missing for years, this was torture. Not enough, never enough. Week 2, November 22nd, 1944. Barracks after lights out. Franz approached Klaus in the darkness, whispered, I have something you want. Klaus sat up. In the shadows, Franz held up a small object, his Wehrmacht watch, silver, engraved with his father's initials. A family heirloom passed down through 3 generations of Bavarian farmers. How much peanut butter? Half a jar. From your breakfast tomorrow. Klaus calculated. His own ration plus Franz's trade would give him a full jar. Enough to feel satisfied for once. Enough to stop the craving that had become a constant ache in his chest. Deal. The black market was born. But Klaus wasn't the only one thinking like a businessman. Werner Vogel, the U-boat commander, saw the same opportunity. And unlike Klaus, Werner had something better than possessions to trade. Werner had access to the kitchen. Because 3 days earlier, Werner had made a deal with Private Tommy Nelson that would change everything. Tommy Nelson was 19 years old, small-town Ohio farm kid, wounded at Sicily, reassigned stateside when his leg never quite healed right. He walked with a slight limp now, would never see combat again. The guilt of that ate at him daily while his friends died overseas. Tommy worked kitchen duty, saw the shipments arrive every Thursday, watched the Germans devour peanut butter, like starving men discovering water in a desert. And something about their desperation reminded him of his own family during the Depression. His father's face when the bank foreclosed on their farm, his mother rationing food so the children could eat. Werner had approached Tommy on November 19th, spoke in careful broken English he'd been practicing in secret. I work kitchen. I help you. You help me. Fair trade. Tommy should have said no. Regulations were clear. No fraternization, no deals with prisoners. But Tommy looked at Werner and saw something familiar. Desperation worn like dignity. Pride masking need. What kind of help? Werner gestured to the heavy crates in the storeroom. Supplies that needed moving, dishes that needed washing. Labor-intensive work that took Tommy hours to complete alone. I work hard. You know this. I lift. I clean. I do good bow. You give small extra. Damaged jar. Loose lid. Jar nobody want. Fair trade. Tommy thought about it. The damaged jars were technically supposed to be discarded anyway. Regulations said any jar with a compromised seal couldn't be served to prisoners or staff. Usually they just got thrown away. And Werner was offering to do work that would save Tommy 3 hours of labor every day. All right, but you work hard, real hard, and if anyone asks you found those jars in the trash. Werner nodded once. Deal made. By December 1st, Klaus had created a complete economic system based on peanut butter as currency. He kept a hidden ledger written in code. His exchange rates evolved with the market adjusting daily based on supply and demand. 1-pack cigarettes 20 count equaled 2 tablespoons peanut butter. But cigarettes were losing value fast. Before peanut butter, cigarettes ruled the camp economy. Now they were becoming nearly worthless. 1 wool blanket extra equaled 4 tablespoons. But blankets were hard to come by. Most men only had one. 1 iron cross metal equaled 8 tablespoons, 1 full ration. Klaus had seen 3 of these traded already. Men pawning their honor for brown paste. 1 gold wedding ring equaled 12 tablespoons, a jar and a half. 2 men had made this trade. Both cried afterward. 1 week of bunk-making service equaled 1 tablespoon per day. This was the most common trade, men bartering their labor for tiny portions. But the most valuable commodity wasn't possessions or labor. It was kitchen access. Men who worked kitchen duty saw the shipments first. Saw the damaged jars, the ones with loose lids or small dents, the ones that technically should be discarded. These damaged goods disappeared before reaching the mess hall. Kitchen workers became the wealthiest men in camp. Klaus's problem was simple. Werner Vogel worked kitchen duty, and Werner was building his own empire. 2 German warriors, both accustomed to command, both desperate for the same resource, both unwilling to yield. The collision was inevitable. December 5th, 1944. Evening, behind the barracks. Klaus found Werner in the shadows behind Barracks C. Werner held a burlap sack. Bulging. Klaus knew what was inside. 6 jars, maybe more. That's camp property. Werner turned slowly. At 35, he had 15 years on Klaus. Scar across his cheek from depth-charge shrapnel. Eyes that had seen men drown in freezing Atlantic water while he could do nothing to save them. And you're what? The camp police. Werner's voice was ice. Controlled, dangerous. I earned these. I work 14-hour shifts in that kitchen. I lift crates that weigh more than you. I scrub pots until my hands bleed. Don't talk to me about property. You're stealing, driving up prices. Men are trading family heirlooms for a spoonful because you're hoarding. Werner dropped the sack. stepped forward. They were 6 feet apart now, close enough that Klaus could see the fury in Werner's eyes. I survived 19 months underwater in a metal coffin. I watched my entire crew die when we were depth-charged off Newfoundland. 42 men. I knew every one of their names. I was the only one who made it out. And you, pretty boy pilot, with your Iron Cross and your 3 years of flying high above the war, you're going to lecture me about fairness. Klaus's fists clenched. He'd trained in hand-to-hand combat, scored high marks. But Werner was bigger, older, and had the look of a man with nothing left to lose. A man who'd already survived the worst thing that could happen. What was a fist fight compared to drowning in darkness? Klaus stepped forward. Werner's hands came up. Both men were 3 seconds from violence when a voice cut through the darkness. Gentlemen, Sergeant Jack Thompson stepped out of the shadows. 6'3", 230 pounds of muscle and weathered leather skin. Hand resting casually on his belt near his sidearm. Not threatening, just present. Y'all gonna kill each other over peanut butter. Thompson's Texas drawl was amused but firm. In my experience, that's what we call a waste of good fighting spirit. What happened next would become legendary in Camp Aliceville. Sergeant Jack Thompson, a widowed Texas rancher who'd never graduated high school, was about to teach 2 elite German officers the most important lesson of their lives. Not with violence, not with punishment, but with something far more powerful: American common sense. Thompson walked forward, stopped between them, close enough that both men had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. Werner, you know what I did before the war? Werner said nothing. Suspicious, raised cattle, ran a ranch in West Texas, had 2,000 head of livestock at peak. You know what I learned about cattle? Werner and Klaus exchanged confused looks. Cattle will fight over one water hole even if there's 10 other holes nearby. They'll gore each other, trample calves, destroy the very thing they're fighting for. You know why Klaus waited? Because they're too stupid to look around and see there's plenty for everyone. Thompson let that sink in. Silence stretched. In the distance, someone was playing harmonica in one of the barracks. A German folk song. Melancholy. Beautiful. Now I'm guessing you boys think you're a lot smarter than cattle. So let me tell you something about this camp. We get a shipment of 500 jars every week. That's for 78 of you. Even with rationing, that's 6.4 jars per man per week. Y'all are fighting over scarcity that don't exist. The only shortage is in your heads. Klaus started to speak, but Thompson held up a hand. I'm not done, because here's what really matters. In 3 months, maybe 6, you'll go home, back to Germany, and Germany, from what I hear, is in bad shape. Real bad. Cities bombed, no food, no infrastructure. Your people are going to need help. American help. Marshall Plan kind of help. Now, do you want to go home as men who learned to work together, or as boys who fought over peanut butter? The silence stretched longer. Then Thompson did something that would change everything. But first, Klaus needed to understand what was really happening behind the scenes. Because what neither Klaus nor Werner knew was that Captain Morrison had been watching this black market develop with intense interest. And he'd just received orders from Washington that would turn this prison camp into a social experiment. November 1944, Office of War Information, Washington, D.C. A classified report landed on the desk of psychological warfare analysts. The subject, re-education of German POWs through material abundance. The concept was radical. What if we could deprogram Nazi indoctrination not through punishment, but through demonstration of American prosperity? Camp Aliceville was chosen as a test site. Captain Morrison received specific orders. Feed them well, show them plenty. Let them experience American abundance firsthand. The theory was simple. Men who'd experienced American generosity would be less likely to support another war. Men who'd tasted American peanut butter would remember it when they returned to rebuild Germany. But nobody in Washington predicted the peanut butter obsession. Nobody predicted the black market. And nobody predicted that a Texas cowboy sergeant would accidentally create the most successful re-education program of the entire war. Back to the confrontation scene. Behind the barracks. Thompson standing between 2 German officers ready to kill each other over brown paste. Here's my offer. Thompson's voice was calm, measured. Werner, you keep working kitchen, but instead of hoarding, you become the distributor. Official Glake. Klaus, you keep your ledger, but you track who needs extra. The sick, the injured, the ones having a hard time. Franz, I want you in charge of making sure everyone gets fair portions. You three work together. I'll make sure you get extra supply. Work against each other. I'll shut down the whole system and you'll all get bare minimum. Your choice. Werner stared at Thompson. Why would you give us more? Because you're going to be running Germany someday. And I'd rather you remember Americans as fair dealers than as jailers. Besides, Thompson grinned, I grew up on peanut butter. If it can civilize you, German boys, it's doing God's work. The three Germans looked at each other. Three men who'd fought for the same flag, now divided by desperation. Klaus was the first to extend his hand. To Werner, not Thompson. No more fighting. We survived together. Klaus said it in German. Firm. Final. Werner hesitated, then gripped Klaus's hand. His grip was strong, calloused from labor. Together, Franz joined them, placing his hand over theirs. Three soldiers, three different backgrounds, three different wars, united by defeat and peanut butter. Thompson watched and nodded. Good, now come with me. I want to show you something that'll knock you on your asses. Thompson led them to the supply warehouse. What they saw inside would complete their transformation from true believers to truth seekers. But on the way, Franz asked the question that had been haunting all of them. Sergeant Thompson, how do you do it? How does America have so much? Thompson's answer would destroy the last remnants of their faith in Nazi Germany. The warehouse door was heavy steel. Thompson unlocked it, pushed it open. Overhead lights flickered on one by one, revealing the interior. The warehouse stretched 50 yards deep. Floor to ceiling, wooden crates, cardboard boxes, metal containers. Labels everywhere. Peanut butter, flour, sugar, coffee, tobacco, canned meat, chocolate, beans, rice, powdered milk, condensed milk, butter, lard, salt, pepper, vanilla, cinnamon. But it wasn't the food that broke them. It was the casual abundance. Half-open crates with goods spilling out. Spilled flour on the ground that nobody had bothered cleaning up. An entire pallet of peanut butter jars, maybe 500 jars sitting in the corner like trash waiting for disposal. Werner walked forward slowly like he was in a dream. Touched crates like they were hallucinations that might disappear if he moved too fast. Werner's voice cracked. This is just for the camp, Thompson laughed. Not mockery, genuine amusement. Hell no, this is just this week's delivery for 78 of you and about 30 staff. Next week we get another shipment. Week after that, another. Every single week until the war ends. And this, he gestured around, this is nothing. You should see the depot in Mobile. Warehouse 10 times this size. Feeding thousands of POWs across Alabama. Feeding American troops overseas. Feeding our allies, all at the same time. Klaus sat down hard on a crate, put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. We were told America was starving. Klaus spoke in German, voice breaking, that the Depression destroyed them, that they had nothing left, that Jews controlled everything and regular Americans were suffering, that we were the strong ones, the superior ones, that we'd win because we had discipline and they had weakness. He looked up at Thompson, tears running down his face. You have everything, and you give to us, enemies. Why Thompson's answer was the moral center of everything. You want the truth because we can. America's got more farmland than any country on earth. We got machines that do the work of 100 men. We got so much food we pay farmers not to grow more because we don't have room to store it all. Thompson paused, made sure they were listening. But here's the real answer, and you need to hear this. We feed you because we're Americans. And Americans don't believe in kicking a man when he's down. Yeah, you fought against us. Yeah, you killed our boys. My wife's brother died at Normandy, probably fighting men just like you. Thompson's voice got quieter, harder. But see, we got this idea in America that every man deserves basic dignity. Doesn't matter where you're from or what you did. You're human beings. You get fed. You get treated fair. You get a chance to learn better. Now I know what you're thinking. That's weak. That's soft. But let me ask you something. Who won the war? The country that hoarded every scrap and let people starve? Or the country that had so much we could feed our enemies? Silence. The Germans had no answer. Thompson nodded. That's what I thought. Come on. Let's get you boys back before bed check. Walking back to the barracks, Franz spoke quietly to Klaus. My father used to say, Franz, you can tell a man's character by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. We are prisoners. We can do nothing for these Americans. But they treat us with dignity, with surplus, with generosity. What does that say about them? And what does it say about what we believe Klaus thought for a long moment? It says we were children. Children told fairy tales by men who wanted power. And we believed them because we wanted to believe we were special, superior, chosen. But there is no superiority. There is only this. He held up his hands. Two men, both hungry. One feeds the other even though they were enemies. That's not weakness. That's, I don't know the English word. Werner spoke quietly. Humanity. The word is humanity. December 1944 became January 1945. The black market didn't disappear, but it transformed. Klaus, Werner, and Franz became distributors, not hoarders. They ensured sick men got extra rations. They tracked who needed what. They settled disputes fairly. Three German officers running an economy based on fairness instead of greed. Camp records show something remarkable. Disciplinary incidents dropped 78% between December 1944 and March 1945. Prisoner cooperation increased dramatically. Medical visits for stress-related illness declined to nearly zero. Captain Morrison wrote in his report, "The German prisoners have formed a self-governing cooperative focused on equitable distribution of resources. I believe we have achieved something unexpected. We have shown them democracy in action using peanut butter as the medium." But the real test was coming. Because in May 1945, Germany would surrender, and these men would face the hardest question of all. What do you do when the cause you fought for is proven completely, utterly, catastrophically wrong? How do you return home to a destroyed country carrying the knowledge that everything you believed was a lie? And could a jar of brown paste really change the course of the Cold War? The answer would come in the spring of 1945, in a moment that none of them saw coming. A moment that would define who they'd become for the rest of their lives. May 8th, 1945, 0600 hours. The announcement came over camp loudspeakers. Germany had surrendered. The war in Europe was over. Klaus Richter heard the news while eating peanut butter on toast. He'd shot down 12 Allied planes. He'd believed in the Führer's thousand-year Reich. Now he sat in an Alabama prison camp eating American food, watching his entire worldview crumble. What he did next would define who he'd become for the rest of his life, and it would determine whether he and thousands of other POWs would help rebuild Germany or sabotage it. In the barracks that morning, silence hung heavy. Klaus sat on his bunk. Werner stood at the window staring out at nothing. Franz paced back and forth, 3 steps one way, 3 steps back, like a caged animal that had forgotten how to be free. It's over. Werner's voice was hollow, empty. Everything we fought for, gone. Franz stopped pacing. What do we do now? Klaus spoke without looking up. We wait. Eventually they'll send us home, to what's left of home. Long silence. Someone down the barracks was crying quietly, trying to hide it, failing. Werner turned from the window. Do you ever think about what we'll tell people when they ask us what America was like? Klaus thought about the warehouse, the casual abundance, Thompson's face when he said we got so much, we don't know what to do with it all. I think about it every day. The door opened. Sergeant Thompson entered. His face was unreadable. Morning, gentlemen. Captain Morrison wants to see the 3 of you. Now. They walked across the camp in silence. Thompson led them to Morrison's office, a small building near the camp headquarters. Inside, Morrison sat behind a simple wooden desk. He stood when they entered. At ease, Morrison gestured to chairs. I'm not here to punish you or lecture you. I'm here to offer you something. He pulled out a file, opened it. The U.S. War Department has authorized a program. Selected German POWs will be offered the chance to stay in America for 6 additional months. Work programs. You'd be paid prevailing wages. Opportunity to send money home to your families. And then, when you return to Germany, you go back with American dollars, American skills, and hopefully American values. Morrison looked at each of them in turn. You 3 have shown leadership here. Organization, fairness. We'd like you to participate. It's completely voluntary. If you accept, you'll be transferred to work camps. farm labor, construction, infrastructure. You'll live and work alongside American citizens, learn our ways, and then go home. Or you can go home next month with the first repatriation ships. Your choice. Klaus found his voice. Captain, may I ask a question? Of course. Why us? Why offer this? Morrison leaned back in his chair, chose his words carefully. Because Klaus, in a few years, Germany will need leaders. Leaders who understand that cooperation beats conquest, that prosperity beats expansion, that feeding people is more powerful than starving them. You three learned that lesson over peanut butter. Sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, but it's true. You learned to work together. You learned that abundance shared creates stability. You learned that there's another way to live besides constant struggle. Morrison's voice got harder, more serious. Germany is going to be a wreck, starving, desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. They follow desperate leaders who promise easy solutions. We've seen this before. That's how you ended up with Hitler in the first place. But if men like you, educated, experienced leaders, go back with different ideas, maybe Germany doesn't make the same mistake twice. Maybe you help build something better. He paused. Or maybe I'm being naive. Maybe you'll go home, tell everyone Americans are soft, and restart the whole damn cycle. That's the risk we're taking. Werner spoke, his voice rough with emotion. Captain, I lost my entire crew. 42 men. I was the only survivor. For a year, I blamed Americans for their deaths. I was angry. I wanted revenge. But you know what I learned here? I learned that my leaders sent those men to die for a lie. Not you, not Americans, German leadership. They lied about American weakness, lied about Jewish conspiracies, lied about the war being winnable. And those lies cost me 42 friends. Werner stood straighter. So yes, I'll stay, I'll work, I'll learn. And when I go home, I'll make damn sure no other German submarine commander sends boys to die for lies ever again. Klaus stood as well. I'll stay too. Not because I'm grateful, though I am, but because I'm curious. I want to understand how a country can be this powerful and still choose generosity. I want to learn the secret, and then I want to take that secret home. Franz smiled, first genuine smile in months. I'll go wherever you two go. Someone needs to keep you from killing each other. They smiled, all three. First real smiles since surrender. Thompson entered the office. So, we got ourselves some volunteers. Morrison nodded. We do, Sergeant Thompson. These men are assigned to your work detail. 6 months. Farm labor in Texas. Try not to break them. Thompson grinned. Hell, Captain, I'm going to teach them to be cowboys. June 1945. Fort Stockton, Texas. A ranch community 200 miles from the nearest city. Population 3,500. More cattle than people. And now home to 25 German POWs assigned to agricultural work detail, including Klaus Richter, Werner Vogel, and Franz Keller. 3 men who'd spent their entire lives being told that physical labor was beneath military officers. They were about to learn the most important lesson of their lives, the dignity of honest work. Thompson woke them before dawn, first morning on the ranch. Time to work, boys. Klaus had never worked a farm. Werner had grown up in Hamburg City life ships and industry. Franz knew farming, but German farming. Small plots. Hand tools. Careful conservation of every resource. Texas farming was different. Vast, mechanized, abundant. Thompson handed Klaus a pitchfork. Barn needs cleaning. 50 stalls. You got until lunch. Klaus stared at the fork. At the barn. At the mountain of work ahead. This is labor. I'm a Luftwaffe officer. Thompson's face hardened. The friendly cowboy disappeared. What replaced him was something colder, harder. Son, I don't give a damn if you're Hermann Goering himself. In Texas, everybody works. Now you can work with dignity or you can work with shame. Your choice. But you will work. Klaus had never cleaned a stable before. The smell alone nearly made him vomit. Horse manure mixed with old hay and standing water. His hands blistered within the first hour. By hour 3, his back screamed. By lunch, he could barely stand. But he finished. All 50 stalls. Clean. Thompson inspected the work, nodded once. Good. Now you know you can do hard things. Tomorrow will teach you to do them well. By week 3, Klaus could stack hay bales with the best of them. Werner learned to repair fences. His submarine engineering skills translated surprisingly well. Measuring, cutting, precise installation. Franz the farm boy taught both of them efficiency tricks. How to lift with your legs, not your back. How to pace yourself through a long day. How to work smart instead of just hard. But the real education came during meals. Thompson's ranch was small, just him and two hired hands. Both local boys too young for military service. They ate together, kitchen table, no rank, no hierarchy, just men who'd worked hard sharing food. And every single meal included peanut butter. One evening in July, Thompson said something that would stick with Klaus for the rest of his life. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset eating peanut butter straight from jars because they were too tired to bother with bread. Earlier that day, Klaus had made a mistake, left a gate open during a cattle drive. 20 head of cattle escaped into the neighbor's property. Klaus watched them scatter and felt ice in his stomach. In the German military, mistakes meant punishment, public shaming, demotion, court-martial. He stood at attention when Thompson rode up on horseback. "Sergeant, Thompson held up a hand, surveyed the scattered cattle, spat tobacco juice, then looked at Klaus. "You ever round up cattle before, no, Sergeant? Well, you're about to learn. Get on that horse. We got work to do." 3 hours later, cattle secured, sitting on the porch exhausted, Klaus spoke. "You didn't punish me." Thompson looked over. "For what?" "The mistake. The cattle. In the German military, I would have been disciplined. Harshly. Did you leave that gate open on purpose? No. Did you fix it when you realized your mistake? Yes. Did you learn not to do it again? Absolutely. Then what the hell would I punish you for? Punishment don't teach nobody nothing except fear. And I don't want you afraid. I want you competent. Fear makes men hesitate. Competence makes men confident. Which one do you think builds a better country?" Klaus had no response. Thompson continued staring out at the darkening sky. "You know what the difference is between America and Germany? I mean the real difference. It ain't food. It ain't factories. It ain't even freedom, though that matters. It's this. In America, we believe mistakes are how you learn. In Germany, from what I hear, mistakes are sins. And if you punish people for trying and failing, they stop trying. They just follow orders and hope someone else takes the blame." Thompson took another spoonful of peanut butter. "But if you let people make mistakes and teach them how to fix them, they take risks. They innovate. They build things. That's why we got peanut butter, and you don't. Not because we're smarter, because we're not afraid to try new things and fail." George Washington Carver invented 300 uses for peanuts. You think he got everyone right the first time? Hell no. He failed hundreds of times, but nobody punished him for it, so he kept trying. Thompson looked directly at Klaus. "That's the American secret, Klaus. We ain't afraid of failure. We just get back up, learn, and try again." Klaus sat on that porch eating peanut butter, watching the Texas sun set over endless prairie, and understood something profound. Germany hadn't lost because Americans were stronger soldiers. Germany lost because Americans were allowed to fail and keep trying until they succeeded. While German soldiers followed orders, even disastrous ones, American soldiers adapted and innovated. The peanut butter wasn't the lesson. The peanut butter was the symbol. The lesson was this: abundance comes from freedom to fail. January 1947, 15 months after Germany's surrender. Klaus Werner and Franz stood on the deck of a ship leaving New York Harbor. In their pockets, American dollars earned through honest work. In their bags, jars of peanut butter gifts from Thompson. In their hearts, knowledge that would shape the next 50 years of German history. But they had no idea that one of them would become one of the most influential figures in rebuilding West Germany, or that their story would become legend among the generation that followed. Hamburg, Germany, February 1947. Werner Vogel stepped off the train and didn't recognize his own city. 90% destroyed. Rubble mountains 30 feet high. Buildings collapsed into themselves like broken teeth. People moving through ruins like ghosts, hollow-eyed skeletal. His parents' house was gone, bombed flat. Just a foundation and scattered bricks. Neighbors told him his mother had died in the firestorm of July 1943. His father had starved to death the previous winter. Alone. In a basement, eating rats when he could catch them. Werner sat in the ruins of what had been his childhood home. opened one of his jars of peanut butter, spread it on a piece of hard black bread, the only kind available, ate slowly, remembered Texas sunsets and Thompson's words about failure and learning. "I'm going to rebuild this." Werner said it out loud to nobody. "I'm going to rebuild all of this, and I'm going to do it the American way." Klaus arrived in Berlin, Soviet sector. The devastation was worse than Hamburg. Entire neighborhoods erased. He found his mother living in a basement with 3 other families, sharing one room, no heat, no running water. His father had been killed on the Eastern Front in 1944. His sister had disappeared during the Soviet advance, probably dead though no one knew for sure. Klaus gave his mother his American dollars, $300, earned dollar by dollar through 6 months of ranch work. A fortune in 1947 Germany, where the currency had collapsed and people traded cigarettes for bread. What is this? His mother stared at the bills like they were magic. Hope. American hope. "I'm going to use it to start a business. Something small, but honest. And I'm going to teach people what I learned. That abundance comes from cooperation, not conquest." Franz came home to Bavaria. His family's farm still stood, barely. His father had died of tuberculosis in 1946. His mother and younger brother had kept the farm alive, but just barely. The fields were half planted, the equipment broken, the livestock sold off for food. Franz showed them his peanut butter, explained what it was, how it was made, how Americans had so many peanuts, they fed them to pigs. "I'm going to plant peanuts, here, in Bavaria. American methods, American seeds if I can get them. We're going to learn to grow plenty." 15 years later, 1962, West Germany's economic miracle in full swing. 3 men now in their 40s and 50s met in Frankfurt for the first time since 1947. Werner Vogel, now a successful construction company owner, helped rebuild Hamburg's port district, employed 300 workers, known for fair wages and profit sharing with employees, an American concept he'd brought home. Klaus Richter, owner of a small chain of grocery stores specializing in imported American goods, including peanut butter. He'd made his fortune by introducing Germans to American products and American business practices. Fair prices, no black market, honest dealing. Franz Keller, running the most productive farm in Bavaria, using American agricultural techniques, growing peanuts successfully, selling them to Klaus's stores. They met at a beer hall, ordered drinks, and laughed. "Remember when we almost killed each other over peanut butter?" Werner shook his head, smiling. "I still have the first jar Thompson gave me. Empty, of course, but I keep it in my office. Reminder of where we came from. I visited him, you know. Thompson, last year, took my family to Texas. He's retired now, still living on that ranch, still eating peanut butter." Franz pulled out photos, his wife, his 3 children, all healthy, well-fed. "What did you tell him?" "I told him he changed my life, changed all our lives. He laughed and said, 'Son, I just fed you and put you to work. You did the changing.'" Silence. They drank. Around them, Frankfurt bustled, rebuilt, prosperous, modern. "We owe him more than peanut butter. We owe him the truth about what that generosity meant, about how it shaped what we built here." Werner nodded. "You think he knows that we used what he taught us to help rebuild this country?" Klaus smiled. "I think he suspected. Americans always suspect they're changing the world. Usually they're right." Franz pulled out an envelope. "He gave me this. Said to open it with you 2. Said it was important." They opened it together. Thompson's handwriting. Simple. Clear. "Dear Klaus, Werner, and Franz, by the time you read this, you'll probably be successful men. I hope so anyway. You worked hard and you learned good. I wanted to tell you something I didn't tell you back in 45. The peanut butter thing. That wasn't an accident. Camp commanders were ordered to feed you well, show you American abundance. The brass thought it might stop you from wanting another war. But here's what they didn't understand. It wasn't the food that changed you. It was learning that generosity ain't weakness, that cooperation beats conquest, that abundance shared creates stability. You took those lessons home, and if you use them to help rebuild your country, then maybe, just maybe, we won something bigger than a war. Maybe we won a peace. The peanut butter was just peanut butter. You 3 were the real miracle. Your friend Jack Thompson. P.S. Klaus, I heard you're selling peanut butter in Germany now. Good man. Werner, I heard you're building houses instead of sinking ships. Even better. Franz, I heard you're growing peanuts in Bavaria. Never thought I'd see the day. That might be the best news of all. Werner cried quietly. Klaus put his hand on Werner's shoulder. Franz raised his glass. To Thompson, to America, to learning how to fail and try again. They drank. Klaus Richter died in 1984 at age 68. His grocery chain had grown to 47 stores. He'd employed thousands, paid fair wages, treated workers with dignity, shared profits. All lessons learned on a Texas ranch. Werner Vogel lived until 1992, age 82. His construction company helped rebuild not just Hamburg, but helped train a generation of East German workers after reunification, teaching them the same lessons Thompson taught him. Mistakes are learning, not sins. Franz Keller is still alive as of this recording, age 94. Still growing peanuts in Bavaria, still telling the story about the 3 German soldiers who went to war believing in superiority and came home believing in generosity. Their children became doctors, teachers, engineers. Their grandchildren study in America. Their great-grandchildren eat peanut butter and don't know the significance. And that's exactly how it should be. If you're watching this and you're over 60, you might remember this era. You might have served. You might have known German POWs. You might have wondered if treating enemies with dignity was the right choice. I'm here to tell you it was. Because Klaus, Werner, and Franz weren't unique. There were thousands of German POWs in America, hundreds of thousands, and most of them went home with the same lesson. America's strength isn't military, it's moral. The Cold War lasted 45 years, but West Germany never turned against us, never allied with the Soviets despite being right on the border, never forgot that Americans fed them when they were starving, treated them with dignity when they were defeated, and taught them that there was a better way to build a society. Was it peanut butter? Number. Peanut butter was just the medium. The message was this: abundance beats scarcity, cooperation beats conquest, generosity beats cruelty, and a country built on those principles will always outlast a country built on hate. Sergeant Jack Thompson died in 1978. Quiet funeral, small town Texas. Most people who attended didn't know he'd helped reshape post-war Germany. Didn't know 3 men who'd sat on his porch eating peanut butter went home and built companies, farms, and families based on lessons learned from a cowboy who never graduated high school. But those 3 men knew, and now you know. That's what makes America great. Not that we're perfect, God knows we're not, but that when we're at our best, we feed our enemies and teach them there's a better way. Sometimes with bombs, but more often with peanut butter. If you served during this era, or if your family did drop a comment, I want to hear your stories about German POWs, about the camps, about what you saw. These stories matter. They're fading fast as the greatest generation passes, but they're lessons. Those need to live forever. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this. Stories about the quiet moments that changed history. The small acts of generosity that won a peace more lasting than any victory. And if you learned something today, if this story changed how you think about power, about generosity, about what makes America exceptional, share this video. Because this lesson, it's one we all need to remember. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the most powerful weapon is not violence. It's casual abundance shared without thought. It's kindness given to enemies. It's ordinary plenty that reveals extraordinary truth. America's greatest victory wasn't military. It was showing starving prisoners that everything their leaders told them was false, one peanut butter jar at a time. God bless America, and God bless the men who learned her lessons.